All right, we just parked. We have to park out here in the boonies. It was $7, which isn't bad for parking in Hawaii because everything else is more expensive. And now we're walking in to the USS Arizona Memorial Park, I guess it's considered. I love this. Don't leave your valuables, but you can't bring any bags inside. So if you leave your valuables in the car, they'll get stolen, but if you can't bring them inside unless you pay for a storage box. So we didn't bring any valuables. One of the things the video talked about, and again, it's probably all history that most people know, is that we had all the battleships lined up. Some general's decision to put them nose to tail. And so it made it easy, but they had like several hundred Japanese planes that came into this small little area and just like dropped a bunch of torpedoes, did a whole bunch of shenanigans, and crushed most of our stuff at the fields, the airfields. We had airplanes just lined up, wing to wing, and they flew through. I think Wheeler Air Force Base it was called. They flew through and just pretty much blew up a bunch, like almost pretty easy. They came up with their aircraft carriers, and you guys all probably know the story, but supposedly our radar guy sent it to them and said, "Hey, they're coming," and the guy was all, "Oh yeah, that's our B-52s coming up from California. Ignore it. Don't worry about it." But it was this like 400 Japanese fighter bombers. So yeah, that was devastating. All right, this gives you an idea. This is Pearl Harbor in here. This is that Ford Island, which is in the middle. So we're over right in here. So it's small. When I said small, that's what I mean. Waikiki's over here. Here's Diamond Head. All right, that's North Shore, all the big surfing. So now if you go around, you'll see here, this is where the radar was over here. This is where the guy saw. So they came in this way from the Pacific and came over land, I guess, or maybe he's just caught them on radar and they came the other way, but he sent the signal. But this just shows you, like, in the scheme of things on the island, it's pretty small. Here's Waikiki over here. They have this little kind of memorial here that lists all the names of everybody on all the ships, the civilians. There's like kids. I mean, you don't need me to tell you this is a tragedy of a pretty large scale. But you see it kind of like the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. When you see all the names, you're just like, oh man. One of the other really interesting things about this is that Hawaii wasn't even a state officially until 1959. And this happened in 41 when it was only a territory. So, think about that now. If somebody bombed Puerto Rico or Guam or whatever our other territories are, would we have the same response? Would we go to war? So I think it has to be that it was really that they bombed our Navy and they attacked the U.S. specifically, even though it was Hawaii, which was technically U.S. territory, but not officially a state. It is an interesting piece of info, I guess. All right, so this is sort of how it's sitting in the water now. Obviously, this is a artist rendering. Not really much you can say. think that's where the Nevada, I think that's the one that ran itself aground so it wouldn't block the shipping channel. And then they have like a thing like that that says the Arizona. They have the one over there, I'm pretty sure it said the Nevada. So the remains of that, they sculled it or whatever you call that. He purposely ran it aground because it was trying to get out to sea, but it got bombed again with the second wave of planes. So he didn't want to block the channel. So he drove it aground. It's amazing. They said 1,177 soldier, seamen, whatever you want to call them, military members were on board. Not just on board, died. Like they did have some survivors. So this shows what it looked like before. And then the remains, so that big circle thing we saw out here, they just cut off wreckage that was above water. Some of the survivors have been brought here to be buried with their crew members. There was one on the other side. It says late as 2021. God knows how old that guy must have been when he passed. But a lot of people have brought their families back to inter them here. All right, some thoughts, Maureen?
Before you even get on the boat to go to the USS Arizona, you've got to go to an expectation-setting lecture, really, where they tell you that you are going to a sacred place and that you need to be quiet and you can't use your cell phone and you can't talk about anything inappropriate and that you need to behave yourself. And I felt a little embarrassed that was a required component of this. I mean, it was probably a 5-minute lecture.
It's like, hey, Americans, don't act the fool.
But we were also reflecting on the time that we were at the Vatican and ended up, you know, if you've done it before, you know, you just sort of end up in the Sistine Chapel. You might not even recognize you're there. It's just one room after another. And they tried to control behavior by over the loudspeakers going, silencio, silencio, silencio. And no one was being quiet at all. And no one was really respecting the space. So I do understand why they do need to do that.
Yeah, I mean, at the Sistine Chapel it was hard too because you were in a really confined space.
Yeah.
And even murmuring was like, you know, it was loud because everybody was doing it. But here, it was a beautiful structure. I think the architecture, you commented on that.
Really great, yeah.
The architecture was great. I think the part for me, and the first time I saw this, it was the same thing, was that you literally look down and the ship is there. And it's like, oh my God. And when you know that there's 1,000 men still down there. And the guys that their families brought them here to be interred with their shipmates. I mean, some of that to me is very, and it's corny to say, maybe, I don't know, it's emotional because you're like, wow. It's a very visual representation. Like you go to cemeteries and you see all the gravestones, but Arlington's like that, I think, too. You get that vibe because it's just row upon row upon row. And you're like, this many? And I think for me, that was part of it too. You see that and you're like, oh my God, the entire ship full of people sunk. And a lot of them burned to death.
Instantly, she said.
And it's so tragic. But, you know, God, there were people on the other ships. There were people in other places. There were civilians that died, as we said. So it's not just the Arizona, but that is a very visual reminder of what happened here. And I think they did an excellent job of presenting it to everybody. Anything else?
I did have something else. I thought it was interesting to think about the survivors who, in several cases, their families had them interred here after they died. So they were not killed in the attack, but they survived the attack and then went on to live, in some cases, very healthy, long lives. The most recent person to be buried here died in 2021. And so you're like, how did they deal with all of that survivor's guilt for so long. Like
That's true.
they
Well,
were
and there's still a
kids when
guy
this
alive. There's a
happened.
guy still alive somewhere in Massachusetts. He's like 106. He was 20, but he wasn't on this ship. He was
No,
on a
he was
different
on
ship.
another
But the
ship.
point was, he's still alive. He was here.
Yeah,
I mean, there's not many of people that can say that.
No.
There's not much of that left.
it's really getting.
But it was very powerful. I think if you have a chance and you're here in Oahu, go to the effort. You have to get reservations, but make the effort, get the tickets. There's so much more to do here that we didn't really do. That if you're interested in it, there's a whole submarine museum. There's an aviation museum. There's a bunch of other little exhibits. It's completely worth it. And
Eat
it's
lunch
free.
before you come.
Yeah, it's basically free. I think they
Yeah.
charge you $1 to get in. Parking costs more than the entrance fee.
Yeah.
So completely worth it. I strongly recommend it.